Good morning. I'm Mary Moglia-Cannon, your service leader. Jeremy Jonczyk is on AV and also our musician for today. Thanks, Jeremy, for that. We are so pleased that Reverend Kristina Church made it all the way from Erie, PA this morning. Thank you, and welcome, Reverend Kristina. And welcome all members, friends, and visitors to UU of East Aurora. We are a community in which all people are welcomed, regardless of belief systems, ethnicities, race, gender identity, sexual orientation, or economic standing. We are in a safe space. And how great is it that we can be here together again this summer? Please take a moment to stand in body or spirit. Say a quick hello to someone else who you haven't talked to yet this morning. To our participants on Zoom, hey, we know you're out there. You can wave to each other or type in the chat. Before I turn it over to Tara, our membership coordinator, for announcements, I'm very pleased to share that next week, Dr. Henry Taylor, UB faculty expert on urban issues and social, racial, and economic justice, is expected for regular Sunday service at 10:30 a.m. Just an update on the family program, Widening the Circle. It had fewer participants than we hoped, and some folks just couldn't do both days. And this particular program is meant to be 10 hours, so the 2 days is kind of what we wanted to happen for everyone. We didn't want anyone to miss out, so we just decided to postpone and regroup until the fall. Tara, do you have any announcements? Where is she? There she is. Hi.
I don't know. Oh, okay. All right, good morning. How are we? Hi, there's so many people. I'm so excited. Hi, Zoom friends. I'm Tara. Announcements. So my class with Mary, Welcoming versus Othering, much like Widening the Circle, is also going to be postponed. I feel like summer's just a weird time. Everyone's kind of all over the place, which is completely understandable. I'm ready to go back to structure too, even though at the same time I'm not. But we will postpone that class until Sunday, September 18th, just in hopes when we have fall people start to come back, and again, schedules are a little more regular, we can see more faces and it'll be a lot better that way. So we're gonna do about 45 minutes max. I have a flyer on the welcome table when you first come in the store to the right if you wanna check it out. It'll be here following Sunday service around 12 o'clock. And I'm not doing a sign-up sheet yet, but I will at the start of September when I start to see more faces, so we can get a head count of how many people are going to be there. There will be role-playing, so please bring your acting skills. It's not required, but it's recommended. Reminder that the church is closed on August 28th and September 4th. Regular Sundays with coffee hour will resume in the fall as well on September 11th at 10:30. So we're looking for volunteers to pick a Sunday and bring something to snack on with coffee. If you love baking, I know I do. I would love to try it, so you should bring it in. We need 3 people for September, just so you know. So if you're willing to do that, let me know, let Mary know, let someone know that you want to share your talents and gifts. That same Sunday on 9/11 is also the water ceremony. So what that means is if you have water from a beach or a lake or anywhere special to you that has water, right? Bring that so that we can all pour it into a jar together for a beautiful community feel and a nice conclusion to our summer. Okay, I will turn it back to Mary. Thank you.
I begin this service by acknowledging that our nation was largely built on the ancestral land of Native nations and the labor of enslaved peoples. May we persevere to achieve a clear understanding of our shared past and utilize these lessons learned for good and for progress. Now our prelude, Journey to the Past, from Anastasia by Liz Calloway, will be played by Jeremy.
And thank you so much for having me this morning. It's a pleasure to be here with all of you in beautiful East Aurora. I used to live in Buffalo, and so it's wonderful to come to Western New York and be here amongst the beauties. So I feel right at home. Thank you. Our chalice lighting this morning, we will light our chalice, the symbol of our faith, with these words from the gray hymnal. We gather this hour as people of faith with joys and sorrows, gifts and needs. We light this beacon of hope, sign of our quest for truth and meaning, in celebration of the life we share together. There we go. Our opening words this morning are from Buddhist practitioner, teacher, and writer Tarshan Hearn. Now is the place to practice right here, just as you are. This very moment in all its vastness, a continuity of freshness, resting resplendently at ease in the fullness and flow of what is presently occurring.
May I be filled with loving kindness. May I be well. May I be filled with
We are reminded that UUEA cannot do anything without members and friends showing up and supporting each other. Sincere thanks to those who participate in events, volunteer their time, share their talents, or who are in a position to be generous. If you are inclined to give after the service, there is a plate on the bookshelf on your way out, or you may do so online at uuea.org. Our reading this morning is another excerpt from True Refuge. Become skilled in this resting, this life-affirming freshness, this gestating womb of nature becoming, deeply belonging, profoundly at home. Where else and what else could one be? As an Air Force kid, Kristina grew up all over the country, but spent most of her time in childhood and young adulthood in Anchorage, Alaska, which she still considers her hometown. After spending most of her life as an agnostic, unchurched, non-affiliated, and non-religious person, she found her way to Unitarian Universalism. She had earned a BA in Russian Studies from Trinity in San Antonio and an MSW from Columbia University in New York. After a successful career as a social worker, followed by many years as a stay-at-home parent, her call to professional ministry emerged as a new direction, and she pursued an MDiv from Meadville Lombard Theological Seminary in Chicago. Before serving as minister of the UU Congregation of Erie, Pennsylvania, Reverend Kristina was consulting minister to UU Hamburg and senior minister at the First Unitarian Society of Westchester at Hastings on the Hudson. Her passions in ministry include climate and racial justice, restorative practices, and pastoral care. Kristina shares her life with her husband Greg, her son Rafa, and a Labradoodle named Onyx. We are so fortunate to have you here. Our program, Jewels for the Journey, with Reverend Kristina Church.
Well, thank you so much. Thank you for the beautiful music and for the centering space today. And I think since we're a little smaller, I'd like to just be very casual with you today, if that's okay, and just speak from my heart. Whenever I talk about Buddhism and the ideas of Buddhism, I like to first share that one of our Unitarian Universalist sources, of course, is wisdom from the world's religions. And so wisdom of the world's religions that inspire us with their ethical and religious teachings is certainly a place where UUs can go for inspiration and comfort and tools. And so I'd like to give us some tools today for navigating difficult times, which I think we would all agree that we're in right now. We have violence happening in our country all around us and in places very close to us. We woke up to the news just a few days ago about what happened in Chautauqua that was mentioned earlier. We, of course, are still reeling from what happened in Buffalo, the racially motivated killings there that are still tearing the community apart. As well, we have the war in Ukraine and the kind of existential anxiety that that is bringing up for all of us, as well as knowing what we've done as a species to our planet and what all beings are likely to suffer as a result of that destruction. So we have lots of ways that we are facing a time where we don't really know what's going to happen in the future. And it's scary. And so I think the first place to begin is to acknowledge that and to be real about that, to enter reality, that reality is pretty scary right now. And I sometimes turn to Buddhist methods and the teachings of Gautama Buddha when I'm in a space like this. And so I'd like to just offer you some of that wisdom. And as the Buddha said, Take it if it works for you, and if it doesn't work for you, feel free to toss it away and try something else. He was very interested in relieving beings from suffering, not from worrying about who created the universe or why we're all here or what's our purpose in life. He was more interested in relief of suffering, which can be very practical. So I'd like to just ground us in a little bit of a story about his life so that we know kind of where he was coming from. And this is from, I'm just going to read a little bit from this book called God is Not One by religious studies professor Stephen Prothero. He says, Buddhism begins with a fairy tale, but it's really a reverse fairy tale. So instead of someone wandering around and then suddenly being blessed with riches, it kind of works in reverse. Someone who was born into luxury and privilege and then ended up giving it all away and leaving it behind. So the Buddha's mother, of course, he was born many, many years ago during the Axial Age. His name was Siddhartha, his given name at birth, and he was born in the 6th century BCE. And his mother died in childbirth with him, so he sort of knew loss and suffering perhaps in his bones. But he was born into luxury and royalty and privilege. And his father was told by a sage that his son would either become a great religious leader or a great warrior. And his father decided, I don't want him to be a religious leader. I don't want him to have that life. I want to go for warrior. So in one of those sort of self-fulfilling prophecies, his father decided to remove any kind of signs of suffering or any notion that the world was not a beautiful, perfect place from Siddhartha's understanding. So the father made sure that everyone in the palace was in the picture of health, that all the servants appeared happy and healthy and in the prime of life. And Siddhartha just lived in this kind of dream. And when he came into adolescence and young adulthood, he started to wonder what was outside of the palace. What was life like out there? And so he asked his father if he could go out to see the world. And so his father arranged for the father's chariot driver to take him around to some very specific sites in the city where they lived and just take him around on this sort of predetermined route where everything would be beautiful and perfect and he wouldn't have to see any sights that would give him pause. So he went around, but of course they couldn't completely get rid of all the sights that Siddhartha might see. So he saw someone, it says on his first tour outside the palace gates, he sees a sick person and he says, "What is that?" to the charioteer. And the charioteer says, "Well, this is a sick person. Each of us falls ill, you and I alike, and there's no getting out of it. It's going to happen to all of us." Then on the second tour, he sees an elderly man. He says, "Well, what is that?" to the charioteer. The charioteer says, "Well, that's an old person. Each one of us will get old, you and I alike. No one is exempt from old age." On the third tour, he actually sees a corpse lying in the street, a dead body. He says, "What is that?" to the charioteer. And the charioteer tells him, "Well, each of us dies. This is a dead person. You and I will die alike in time. No one is exempt." And on his fourth and final tour, Siddhartha sees a wandering holy man. And he says, "What is this?" The charioteer says, "Well, this is a wandering beggar who has left behind his spouse and his family and his job, and he's gone in search of spiritual liberation." So that is the story of the gradual awakening of the Buddha, that the first awakening. And he goes on many more adventures, and you can read about his life. And he eventually finds what he calls spiritual enlightenment. He achieves a state of cessation of suffering. But the first awakening that he experiences is an understanding that life is filled with suffering, that all beings suffer, and that life is not the dream that he thought it was, that he was told that it was in his home. And so he begins to grapple with this idea of inequality, of poverty, of suffering of all kinds, and what it means for his life and for everyone else. And so, many of us maybe can relate to that progression of the Buddha's life, and many of us perhaps have had a temptation to stay in the palace, right? And stay, if we have any kind of privilege, if we've been born into any kind of not necessarily just wealth, but educational privilege, of course, skin color privilege, ethnic privilege. If we are from any kind of a dominant place in society, it can be very tempting to stay in this bubble, right, in this place of privilege. And if we are born into, maybe we relate more to folks in this story who are outside the palace walls, who have always known about suffering. And maybe what we grapple with is more our anger and frustration at others who do not see it and who remain in their denial. And so the first jewel of Buddhism, as ironic as it might seem, is this place of awakening, this place where we become aware of all of life's beauty and transience and impermanence, and of all of its terror and all of its sadness. And we momentarily can hold that in our hearts and in our minds. And so the first jewel of Buddhism is actually, you will hear Buddhists say, I take refuge in the Buddha. That doesn't mean that they take refuge in this person that lived all these years ago. The word Buddha actually is related to the word awareness and awakening. So it means that we take refuge, strangely, in this state of openness, in this state of awareness that life is not all that we dreamed it would be. And so this can be a moment of great epiphany. It can be a moment of a thunderclap kind of awareness, or it can be an awareness that's always been with us because we've lived with suffering all of our lives. Or it can be a gradual awakening, as it was with the Prince Siddhartha. And our challenge, because we're no good to others when we hide away in our palaces and when we build up places that we think will protect us, but we're also no good to others when we get engulfed by our despair about this. And so our challenge is to hold this understanding of the beauty and the terror and the wonder and the miracle of life, all in this human heart that we have, this human vessel. So that is the first jewel of Buddhism, is this sense of awakening. The Buddhists say, I take refuge in Buddha. I would encourage us as Unitarian Universalists to think of it as taking refuge in reality, right? That we're not going to have our walls of denial, that we're going to take refuge in the groundlessness of reality, in the impermanence of this nature of reality. So we vow to stay awake and aware about what is really happening in our world. It sounds a bit of a paradox, doesn't it? It sounds like a paradox. I'd like to invite you now to think about something that helps you get to that place, helps you get to that place of open awareness of life, whether it is a piece of poetry, maybe it's a place that you go, a physical place, or a place that you go in your heart. Maybe it's staring out of a telescope up at the stars in the heavens. But each of us perhaps has something that can bring us to that place of open awareness. And I'd like to suggest to you that it's a good thing to be close to during these times, during these anxious times, that can be a touchstone for you in your life. So, we have opened up to the beauty and the terror of all existence, to the suffering of all beings. We have this beautiful heart awakening, and what do we do then? Do we stay there? Unfortunately, the Buddha says no. We don't have the ability to stay there all the time. What happens is that our habits take over again, or it's just too easy to retreat back into the bubble, or our anger comes to the fore and we act out in ways when people hook us in their actions. So we're not always able to stay in that state of open awareness all the time. So the Buddha says that the second jewel is Dharma. Now, Dharma may be a familiar word to you. What I've learned from my research is that it's hard to translate into English. It's a Sanskrit word, and it can mean teachings, it can mean learnings, it can mean the path that you walk on, the path of right action. It can also mean the practices that you take on regularly to strengthen you in this path of wisdom. So it's all of those things kind of all balled up together. And what I'd like to suggest for us is that it's not a one and done kind of a thing. It's not like we wake up, we read a book and it wakes us up to something, or we see something in the street, or we begin to understand the nature of life, and then we're just finished. No. Unfortunately, or fortunately, we humans will go right back to our distractions and our denials and our bubbles. We'll go right back to wanting to cling on to something that we think will save us, whether it's wealth or privilege or connections or whatever it might be, that we think will give us a way out of this world. So, what we need to do is have a practice, have a regular practice of continuing to hold our hearts open. It's kind of like training. It's kind of like if we were to decide that we wanted to run a marathon or train to be a bodybuilder. We wouldn't just read a book about bodybuilding and consider that it was done. If we wanted to become a pastry chef, we wouldn't just read some recipes in a book and taste some cakes and decide that we were finished, would we? We'd need to make a couple of cakes, and probably some really bad ones at first. We'd need to pick up some weights and start training, and probably be really sore at first, right? And we'd expect that. We'd expect that there's a learning curve. Now, unfortunately, sometimes with spiritual practices, we think that it should feel good right away and that everything should be wonderful. In fact, when I first started meditating, I'll share with you that I thought that I was going to find this wonderful sense of peace and calm, and everything was going to be copacetic, and I would just walk around like I was floating on a cloud. And instead, the exact opposite thing happened. I became very cranky, and my eyes would tear up at strange times, and I thought, what is happening to me? And what was happening, I see now, is that everything that I've been pushing down and pushing away was coming back up when I was giving myself some space to experience it. And as we say, the only way through it was straight through it. There wasn't any way around it. But I had been avoiding and running away and denying. And so sometimes this is what it feels like when we start a new spiritual practice. But if we'll stay with it, we find that it does give us a spaciousness, a place where we can let those things come through us. There are lots of different kinds of meditation, and I'm sure you've heard of some of them, the loving kindness meditation, where we send out love to all beings. There's meditation that allows us to see what's going on in our bodies. There's meditation that allow us to let go of debilitating thoughts and let them just flow through like clouds in the sky. But I know that meditation isn't for everyone. And so there isn't a need to take up this new meditation practice if that doesn't sound like the right thing for you. But I would like to suggest that this second jewel, Dharma, that if we will do a regular practice of some kind, that we will find that we can keep that feeling of being open to life, that we feel that feeling of presence and resting in the present moment more and more often. And so the other thing I want to say about spiritual practices is that for UUs, they can really be anything, as the Reverend Eric Walker Wickstrom says in his book on spiritual practices, they can be anything that connects us to the present moment and to life and clears away what isn't life. So clears away the distractions, the habits that don't serve us, the daily running away and the daily numbing and the ways that we try to cope and push reality away from us. So let me give you some examples. When I work with people to find a spiritual practice, I often ask first, what is it that you need more of in your life? Because we don't all need the same things. Some of us are going through difficult times and we need solace. Some of us need to stop putting reality away and to take in the understanding of what life really is. We need more awareness. Some of us need more spaciousness in our day. So I'll give you just a second to think. The word will maybe flow into your head about what is it that you need more of. Not what you need to do. It's not spiritual broccoli. It's spiritual ice cream. What is it that you need more of in your life right now? And maybe you want to call out or write in the chat a word. If you would like to share with us what you need more of, I invite you to share it. Direction. Patience. Oh, that's a good one. I think lots of us can relate to that. Yes.
More jog time.
More jog time. Yes. Yes. Fulfillment. Okay. So you can see these are all different things. And whatever it is that you need more of to connect you to life, then I invite people to think of a time during your day. Maybe it's something that's already happening, something that you don't have to add a big new routine, but maybe you're taking a walk each day, or maybe you're drinking a cup of tea in the morning, or you are running an errand that happens on a regular basis. And if you think of a time during your day that has a habitual quality to it, and it should be something that you sort of enjoy, not something that you hate. Maybe washing the dishes. Maybe there's an aspect of washing the dishes that can be pleasant. Running the warm water. so then maybe with just a little bit of a shift, you can make this into a time in your day that has that quality of spaciousness and awareness for you. So maybe you can bring some attention and intention and regularity to this practice. For example, if you are going on a walk every day, I knew someone who was taking their dog for a walk each day, and they added just a little ritual of looking for beauty all around them and naming to themselves 2 or 3 things that they saw that they were grateful for. And that changes everything, doesn't it? It brings a moment of beauty and solace and joy. I knew someone who was drinking tea in the mornings and decided that they were going to sit down with a book of short poems and just read a short poem each morning and write down in a journal a line that spoke to them that morning. And that brought a certain amount of presence to their morning. So there are practices that we can find that will not take a terrible amount of time from already busy schedules, but that can give us a moment to connect with our lives, with our hearts, with what we need during the day. So I'd offer that to you. Now, we are aware and awake, and we're practicing, and we're going along, and what's the next stumbling block? We get busy, or we get frustrated because nothing's happening, or we get bored with the routine, or we aren't perfect at it, and so we say, it's not worth it, I'm not doing it every single day, I fell off for 2 days, and so now I have to stop. So that brings us to the next jewel in the chain, which is Sangha. Now, Sangha is an easier word to translate. It just means community. And what Buddha said was that we need a community of people to practice with, to learn with, to grow with, so that we have some kind of structure involved in our lives, and also that people can kind of keep us honest, right? We have a place where we go where both people give us solace when we're struggling with something, and also where if we're not living into our best selves, if we're not really embodying our ideals, that people will let us know about that they will hold us to covenant. Covenant is a really important word in Unitarian Universalism. In fact, those relationships, those covenantal relationships, how we agree to be together, is really the core of our faith. And so Sue Phillips, who is a Unitarian Universalist thinker and writer and fabulous program planner at the Unitarian Universalist Association, she says that you can't really be a Unitarian Universalist all by yourself because of this covenantal nature of our faith. And so it's really easy to sit in our rooms and do our spiritual practices and gaze at our navels and think we have it all figured out, right? And yet, we need that community. And sometimes the very most frustrating things about being in community, that kind of rubbing up against each other's rough edges, is what polishes out our own rough edges, right? And so we need that sense of being together. So right now, today anyway, we are a community today. We are a Sangha. And this may be your primary community where you pursue wisdom and truth, or you may be just dropping in to see what it's like. But today we are a community, and that includes all of our folks on Zoom today. And so I would like for you to just look around at one another, give each other your beautiful smiles, your beautiful faces, and appreciate this moment of being in Sangha, being in community. And don't forget our friends on Zoom. Thank you. Thank you all for being here. Now, I want to name one of the very most important things about community before I leave this, which is that we can amplify our voices together. So we can come together and make change on a more of a systemic and societal level. We cannot do that by ourselves, right? So we need to distinguish between individual suffering, which we can work on with spiritual practices, and systemic and societal suffering, which needs the community and the power of the community to come together and make a change. So, Buddha, Dharma, Sangha, these are the three jewels, or as I've kind of relabeled them today, waking up to reality and staying in reality, focused learning and activity to stay there, and being held in a community, both being held in love and being held to account by a community of faith and practice. So you need not be Buddhist or believe in any particular system of theology in order to find these three jewels a useful idea for our times. Awaken to reality, find your source of truth, study it, sustain yourself with practical learning, and find a way to be held in some kind of a community. No matter what comes, whatever the future holds, if we can hold these three close, I think we'll be okay. And may it be so. Thank you.
Keep your heart wide open, though the waves wanna push you around. You gotta keep your heart wide open till your faith brings you back to solid ground. I'm gonna keep my heart. I'm gonna keep wide open. I'm gonna keep my heart wide open. Though these waves wanna push, though they want me around, though the waves wanna push me around, I'm gonna keep my heart. I'm gonna keep wide open. I'm gonna keep my heart wide open till my faith brings me back to solid ground. Until my faith brings me back to solid ground. We gotta keep our heart. We gotta keep wide open. We gotta keep our hearts wide open. Though these waves wanna put us around, although these waves wanna push us around, we gotta keep our heart. We gotta keep wide open till our faith brings us back to solid ground. Till our faith brings us back to solid ground. Say hi.
Well, our time together is coming to an end, at least our formal time together. And so I will now extinguish the chalice. Oh dear, do I just blow it out? I guess so. And the words for the chalice extinguishing are in your program, so please join me in saying them if you would like to. We extinguish this flame, but not the light of truth, the warmth of community, or the fire of commitment. These we carry in our hearts until we are together again. And I'd like to leave you with the Buddhist metta meditation as our benediction today. May all beings be well. May all beings be free from suffering. May all beings be filled with loving kindness.